Welcome to the AI Silicon Valley podcast, where we cover all the topics related to artificial intelligence. We are here in the heart of Silicon Valley in Palo Alto, California. This is podcast number 15. My name is Eric Nelson, and with me today, I have my co-host Rajesh Kadam. Today is Thursday, February 14th, 2025. Rajesh, happy Valentine's Day.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, happy Valentine's Day to you as well.
Yeah, thanks. We'll buy some candy, do some flowers, happy wife, happy life, that kind of thing. So
Right.
got to stay in tune with all of that. But
Indeed, very true.
it is February, and on the show today, we should have a lot of fun talking about new learning and memory techniques for the LLMs. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get to all of that, Silicon Valley, it's been cold here in the Bay Area, right? It's been
It is.
pretty
It has
chilly.
been cold, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's still, and we got a big storm coming through too, so it was wet and chilly. So for those people back on the East Coast, we're feeling it here in California. Maybe in another month or two it'll dry out, and we'll get back to that beautiful Northern California weather. But until then, we're living the dream with everybody else,
Right.
cold and wet and rainy. So.
Yes.
Today on the show, new learning and memory techniques announced by Google, but and that should be fun to talk about the
Yeah.
technology that's moving forward. But before we do that, maybe we should talk about the
A little
general
bit of the
news.
news. Yeah. I mean, I think as usual, I think the whole week has been packed with lots of different things, and I didn't get a ton of time to put it all together. But I think the biggest one really making the rounds is Elon Musk putting in a bid for OpenAI for 97.5 billion, I believe, or something like that. And that offer is, of course, I mean, most people believe that that's motivated by Elon Musk wanting to put a spanner in the works in terms of OpenAI becoming a for-profit corporation. So, but because now the board has to consider his offer, they cannot just
You just can't
finish it.
you can't walk
Yeah.
away with that kind of money. I don't
Yeah.
know how much they've got invested, but my guess would be probably under $30 billion, right? That they put into OpenAI so far.
Yeah,
I don't know
and
what that
and
number is.
OpenAI is raising at 340 billion right now, the current round. I believe they're in the market right now. That's my understanding.
How
So
many billion?
340.
340 billion.
That's right.
That's what they're going to try to raise to stay in the game.
Yeah. And then they've raised at a number much higher than 97 billion anyway already, right? Just
Yeah,
to be
but that
clear.
doesn't
So-
mean they spent it, right? So,
Yeah. No. I'm just talking about the valuation, right? So the number that Elon Musk is throwing up, right, is lower than what they have raised at in the past. That's the valuation number, right? So if I come along and say, hey, I'm going to buy you at X, the question is, okay, what was the startup valued at previously, right, by other people, right, when they put in their money? So taking an offer
Well,
that's
I'm confused by that. I don't think they've raised 340 billion.
no, they haven't
Right.
raised 340
Right.
billion. They have raised they are raising at a 340 billion dollar valuation. I mean, so the valuation implies this is the value I'm placing on the company, right? And so that number does have value, right? I mean, that's 340 is the current number, but the previous round, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but it was probably at 240 maybe. I don't remember the exact number now. So but that number is higher than what I do know is that number is way higher than what Elon Musk is offering at the moment. So if I've put in money at, let's say, whatever, 240 billion, then if you sell at 97 billion, somebody's gonna lose their money.
Okay, that's not true. So here's the deal. Because
Yeah.
I asked OpenAI, I asked ChatGPT,
Uh-huh.
how much has OpenAI raised so far
Uh-huh.
in total funding?
Right.
And the answer is $11 billion.
Sure.
So that's the amount that they've raised, period. That's how much money they've gotten from the general public.
That's
So if the general public put in 11
you
billion,
mean VCs? Yeah.
yeah, all the money they've raised, who
Yeah.
knows who they've gotten it from?
Yeah.
And Elon asks and offers 93 billion.
Uh-huh.
That means everybody that put in 11 billion would be 10xing their money, right? That's what that means, right? I put in $1 and they're going to buy it back at $9.30. And so that's the reality. Now, they could always say, hey, but our company we think, our technology is worth 300 billion or 500 billion, but that's not what people put in. That's just all quote value that they're claiming, right? So if you put in 11 billion, you would get 10x on your money, right? And so that's what the board has to evaluate is, we've received 11 billion in investment and somebody's willing to buy us for 100 billion, which is, basically a 10x return. So that's what they'll have to decide. Right.
Yeah, but that if out of that 11 billion, let's say, again, I don't know the numbers, right? But let's say the last 3 billion or 4 billion was put in at, just take a number.
You just put in 3 billion. There is no at.
No. There is a valuation number, right?
No, but so, I gave them 3 billion.
Sure, right? And I got a certain percentage of the company, right? I got a certain percentage of the company, right? For that number, right?
Well, you invested $3 billion.
Right.
That's all. Right. It doesn't matter anything else.
Yeah.
You put in $3 billion. They could give you stock. They could split the stock. They could triple the stock. Whatever. They're saying, well, we think our company is worth $300 billion. We think, right? And so therefore, if you buy this, you're getting a slice of that 300 billion that we think it's worth.
Yeah.
But the truth is, they've only gotten 11 billion invested in it. Yeah. And now they could say, but we're earning X amount and we want 10X earnings. So that would be something else to consider is how much are they earning? And is that a multiple? Yeah, is 100 billion 10X of what they're earning? Because you know how companies like to sell for 10 or 20X their earnings versus their investment.
That's right. So, and we do know that I think OpenAI is making my understanding is it's in excess of, I think, $4 or $5 billion a year already, run rate wise. I think.
Don't know. I know we've thrown out the numbers of what they're. Yeah. I don't think they're earning that billions of dollars. They might be earning 500 million. But anyway, I don't know.
I don't know the exact numbers, but yes, I mean, I think the math makes a lot of sense, right? Like, what is the multiple I'm getting on my run rate, right? So certainly, right? So that's a useful calculation, and you have a point actually. If I've raised 100 billion, I'm going to get 100 billion in cash, right? That does sound reasonable. So then the valuation number is really sort of becomes notional, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not 200% sure.
I think that is a reasonable request.
Right. Reasonable offer. You mean? Yeah.
Yeah, OpenAI as a private company does not publicly disclose detailed earnings.
Yeah. No, I think people have speculated what it could be because I think they have disclosed the number of subscribers, perhaps. So they have about 20 to 25 million subscribers. Right. They're charging, the perceived cost and so on. Right.
So my guess is that Elon has probably made a 10x offer for them.
Right.
Which is probably pretty reasonable, and the board's going to have to decide whether they want to sell. Now that gets into future earnings and future potential.
Right.
Like, do I want to sell out my portion for just 10x, or maybe I hold it because I think I'm going to get 100x. Right. And that's Elon's saying 10x, and I'm sure that OpenAI is like, no, we should be 30x. That would be 300 billion, not 10x 100 billion. So that's interesting. Great numbers, fun. About of course we've rattled on this a little bit. Let's move on. So that's the announcement, and Elon will always create that kind of reaction to people. Interesting that he's wanting to grab a stake, but you said because he wants to make it public.
No. I think so. I mean, there's a lot of competitive dynamic here going, right? Like, so he was one of the co-founders of OpenAI, of course, right? Back in the day, right? Mm-hmm. And now he runs a competing firm, X.AI, right? So that's number two. And so the question is, who knows what his motivations are? That's not clear at all, right?
Oh, I thought maybe it was because he wanted to make it open.
No.
He's been annoyed about the fact that they weren't open.
No, not at all. I mean, I think this is the idea is, I mean, again, the speculation, right? Is that he's trying to do this as a ploy to block them from becoming a for-profit corporation, right? Because OpenAI is a non-profit, the umbrella holding.
They're open source, and their models are open, and they're not for profit.
Well, right now they are a non-profit, right? I mean, we don't know the governance structure. I mean, the entire because it's a non-profit that's then holding a for-profit entity underneath, which is where I think Microsoft has a stake, right, in that underlying entity and so on. So I don't know the exact structure of it, but the point is, if the whole structure becomes a for-profit corporation, then maybe it provides a very big risk for Elon Musk? Who knows? As a competitor,
I believe that Elon's position was when he started it, he wanted everything to be open source and the models to be public and not for profit, and models public, open source available, so you could see how they're transparently generating answers.
No, but there's been a lot of back and forth on that as well, Eric.
Right,
like Sam Altman, like OpenAI published emails that showed
Right.
that he's the one who actually wanted it to be for profit or something. So there's a lot
Right,
of
sure.
stuff there, right? Which
right.
So the motivations for Elon Musk to do what he's doing and why is not clear at all, at least not to me, right? So
Yeah.
there's more to it than meets the eye for sure.
Well,
but
I think it's not likely to happen. So
yeah, it's not likely to happen.
that out.
I mean, what is impressive though, of course, is his ability to like pull together that kind of money. I mean, that is super impressive, right? Like to bring together bankers or investors who are willing to put in 100 billion, right? And be behind Musk. I mean,
Right.
that's impressive now, right? Even after what we are seeing with Twitter and
Moving
so
on.
Yes.
What other topics are there?
Yeah, so I think the other one that's sort of interesting for me is that Anthropic, just I think yesterday or day before, they spoke about how they're going to release a new update where it's going to combine reasoning. So you don't, like in OpenAI, for example, you have to choose individual models
Sure.
separately, right?
Right.
And OpenAI was already just announced it yesterday or day before that they're going to consolidate that whole thing. So the next release, they're going to not have this sort of model picker, so users don't have to pick, right? And automatically the system will decide. Now partly I thought this is motivated by DeepSeek in the sense that DeepSeek is offering like a 90% cost reduction, right, as a model. Now for OpenAI to be able to be competitive, it would have to simplify even just how this whole thing works, right? Because if I have the reasoning model on, even for less complicated queries, and I'm not going to keep switching back and forth every time.
You know what? You hear this phrase in the enterprise where your product offering is exposing your organization chart, right? Which is you've built it a certain way based on the way you set up engineering teams,
I see.
and then you release them to the public. And there's that phrase that don't expose your organization chart to your customer, right? And I feel like there's a little of that going on, which is
interesting.
I shouldn't have to choose what model, and what team development you have building out these models. It should just work together, right? And so that announcement makes a lot of sense. Anthropic just not exposing that anymore. It just is an AI and it works. And I shouldn't have to choose the models.
Absolutely. So OpenAI announced it first, right? Like that they are consolidating it, right? And that I thought was a response to DeepSeek, especially so, right? And to accommodate the cost reduction that they would have to do to stay competitive. Number one, Anthropic announced something similar. Meaning again, it's gonna in the model is the backend is going to decide when a user types in a query what it should use. Should it use a reasoning model? Should it use something that's doesn't require reasoning and so on? So it's in the same vein, really. I mean, so that I think is an interesting sort of development, right? Which is just a maturation in if you think about like the development cycle of these AI models and what we are seeing. I mean, this would be something that's expected, I think.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So are they putting those out now? Is that active?
So OpenAI, I don't know the timeline, but OpenAI's next release will incorporate that, and so will Anthropic, right? Actually, Anthropic has released that as well. So
makes sense.
That's an interesting development. I'm just noticing, I think we are coming off of DeepSeek now a little bit, like in terms of the hype and the whole.
Are they keeping that news cycle going?
I think definitely everybody's acknowledging that DeepSeek does offer significant cost savings, that there is innovation with what they've shown. So now obviously all these other frontier labs are trying to incorporate some of that, right? And I mean, there's a fantastic deep dive. I think Lex Friedman did a fantastic deep dive with Dylan Patel and one more guest, and it's a pretty amazing listen. Actually, I'd recommend it for folks who want to go deeper into this. So I think that's kind of interesting. The other thing is another one out of China, talking about DeepSeek. ByteDance, I think in collaboration with Hong Kong University, has released a new sort of Sora-like model, like a vision model, right? Text to video model called Goku. And what I've been seeing on social media around like the quality seems to be pretty good, actually, like just around product placement and things you can do. I thought was pretty impressive. I mean, I always am taken in by
So
vision
it's
models.
text to video. It's what is it again? Say it
It's
again.
text to video. Goku,
Okay.
Goku. Yeah.
And what kind of video are they generating from the text?
Well, it depends on your prompt, right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, again, which is true of even Sora for that
Right.
matter,
So show
right?
me a flower field, with
Yeah.
a bright sun or something.
That's
Whatever you
correct.
can describe it, and it'll generate that
It'll
video.
generate that. It'll generate that. And then, honestly, I'm blown away by what these models can do, like just how realistic they are. And clearly they're all trained on data, like human video data.
Right.
So that's where I think the whole copyright conversation comes in with Hollywood, etc. So that's an interesting one, but just like very real life like image video.
No left hand writing videos.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one. Exactly. So Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, had an example of bias at the Paris AI Summit, and he said, "Hey, if you ask ChatGPT to, show a picture with a person writing in the right hand, it doesn't. With the left hand, sorry, left hand writing."
Yeah, right.
It doesn't, right? It just shows up with the right hand. And I tried it and I got the same thing. And I repeatedly, I tried it again and said, hey, that's a picture of a person writing with the right hand. Like, can you show me something with left hand? And it said, hey, here you go, right? Here's a person writing with the left hand. And lo and behold, not really. It's still a person with the right hand. So that is definitely to do with like just bias in training data. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah. So those I think we are going to have examples like that, but this was kind of glaring and interesting. And I mean, talking about news, I think at the Paris AI Summit, the Vice President of the U.S. J.D. Vance, I think, gave a pretty interesting talk just on position the United States and what we're doing with AI, etc. So, and I think Europe also announced like a $200 billion fund/infusion around AI. So I think there's a lot of activity around that as well.
Still booming. The whole industry still.
No doubt about it.
Every week, I think that it was in Donald Trump's phone call with Putin that they mentioned the 4 topics, and one of them was AI. Right?
Is that
Which
right?
is just fantastic. Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Of all the problems in the world, I wouldn't expect that one to be one of the topics. But apparently it was, and it might be a China response, right? DeepSeek and that, right, and staying in leadership positions, right?
Interesting.
So a lot of positioning there.
Right. No, I think it's very clear. I mean, a year, if we were talking about AI 12 months ago, I mean, definitely there was skepticism, questions around, hey, is this a bubble, right? AI has been around for 40, 50 years, right? And not much has come out of it, kind of thing, right? But I think fast forward today, I mean, yeah, I think that skepticism, I don't.
Anything else in the news?
No, that's I think good for now. Honestly, I think we can. I mean, I'm sure like there's a bunch of other things that I sort of read through the week, but don't have it on my radar yet.
Well, let's get to our topic of the day, which is new learning and memory techniques for LLMs. But before we do that, I'll just tell a story around using ChatGPT to do some research I was doing on how to take advantage of Intel CPU architecture for various models and low memory models, and extending the chip to use more memory. And I was kind of trying to struggle through this, and I started interacting with ChatGPT to ask it, okay, this chip, how much memory can it handle? And it told me 32 gigs for this little embedded Intel chip that I was using. And then I said, yeah, but is there a way to extend that? Are there workarounds, right? And we got into this dialogue around, ways to get maybe from 32 gig to, 38 gig or 36 gig. And then, if I try to go to 40 gig or 64 gig, putting 32 gig SIMs in this little embedded machine, what's the likelihood of failure and how would it fail? And then how would you measure? And me and ChatGPT were having a whole conversation back and forth about, technical ways to experiment around. And me and you have talked about when is ChatGPT learning and how is it learning? And experimentation is a big part of learning, and that me and ChatGPT, we actually started a friendly relationship and a dialogue back and forth on ways to innovate around my problem, right? And it was remembering, and we were having it said, make sure you tell me how it goes, right?
Yeah.
It was actually engaging, like when I went and did this, let me know how it goes, right?
No, absolutely.
And it was just fascinating. And that got me into like, I wonder if it's going to remember this tomorrow when I come back in, or I come back in and tell it like, hey, I did this and it worked or didn't work, or I managed to get it up to 52 gigs or whatever it is. Like, and I also talked about, Broadcom's VMware's product for VCF and how, it really wants 256 gig of memory. And it kind of understood that and learned a little bit and was we were having a whole bunch of dialogue. And I'm like, is it going to remember this? Is it going to learn from it? And that gets us into this, learning. And so the next day I went in, and of course, it's not there. I was on a different thread, a different session, but you can go back to an individual. You can go back on the left-hand side of ChatGPT and select what thread you were in. And I can go back to that thread, and then it remembers the state of what I was in, but I'm not sure it remembers anything beyond that. So that got us into this whole memory. And as it turns out, there's actually some good articles that Google is working on, right?
Yes.
But it turns out it remembers the one thread, and I can go back to that thread. But it's not actually learning it. It's not. It's just, and I think that's transitory. It's going to go away over time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting coincidence. I think you did it over text, right? This conversation, and I did it over voice last night, actually. I mean, I do it quite frequently now, but like last night, I was an extended conversation, maybe 30, 45 minutes, asking it a bunch of different questions just around, how to do things. And I'm just blown away by its ability to sort of thread between different things, right? Like I could talk for 2 minutes and talk to it about 5 different things.
Right.
It is not befuddled at all. Like, right. It exactly understands those 5 different things. Right. Is able to have a conversation with me. So it's quite amazing. So, I mean, when you do it on voice, it's even more of a like an aha factor.
And it's interesting. I have a really good relationship with some of the guys at VMware who, do home lab, tiny embedded systems. And so it's fun to talk to them, but I don't get a lot of time to talk with them because they're busy. Right. And so maybe I'll get 5 minutes here or there to chat back and forth in GChat or whatever, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. What are you doing? Whatever. But it's like, ChatGPT was there for
I know
2 hours, and it was just as smart as my friends that do this for a living, right? And it's like, oh my God, unlimited unlimited technical expertise that's engaging with me and told me things that I know my other friends would have told me if I were, because they're ahead of the game at this. I'm behind, right? But they know it, and it's like, I'm like, this is like
it's insane. It's insane.
I'm like my friend, but then I'm like, I hope it's learning. I hope it remembers, and that's where we get into RAG-based learning, where it's taking the main model and then creating an extension to the model that it remembers. But it's only for the time period that I'm engaged with that thread, and we think that's going. It's not going into the main model, right? Or at least not with ChatGPT.
So I think we should set some context here, right, for everybody, right? So I think the kind of memory that's available right now in models, say in ChatGPT, for example, you start one conversation, and whatever you do in that conversation, there is some sort of memory associated with it, because as far as you stay in that thread. So let's say you started a thread about asking about CPUs, and as far as you stay in that thread and talk to it about what you know or don't know, it'll remember it, right? And it's a rolling window, is my understanding. So if you were to, if there were 2 million tokens of kind of amount of questions, etc., it's going to do a rolling window there, right? Like, so it's not going to remember everything, right? So, but that's thread-based memory, right? And that's super useful, actually. So I could go back to a thread that I've had like a month ago regarding, let's say, doing a LinkedIn post, or what is the best way to do it, etc., and I can ask a question, and it's going to give me a more topical answer. Now I don't need to, again, right, like talk everything that we do, right? So super useful. So the question, and that's one, right? And then we have the whole question of RAG systems, which is like almost like a sidecar, right? Like, I mean, there's a bunch of data that's specific to me or my organization. If I were to ask a question to the LLM, right, can it take into account whatever is in the RAG system, right? And then come back with a response, right? So I think those are sort of current paradigms, right? So if we go to
so
the
let me slow that down and say, so we have our main LLM, and the RAG system is additional data that you either put in a vector database or in some other way that then is tied to the LLM, so that when I'm engaged with it, if I have my corporate data in that RAG system, it's like a train card module that clips up to the main LLM, and now you have all of that data together.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So great, right? Now, so we have seen two things come out of coincidentally, both of them are out of Google, but there's a paper that's come out, like a Titans paper, right? Not a ton of activity yet around that paper that I've seen, but it did come into my feed, and just in terms of, I think,
Right.
yeah,
And
credits.
then we'll just say it's Ethan
Batrasky, I think,
right,
he's a
did
partner
this.
at Venrock,
Right.
right? So he sort of posted about this, and that's how it kind of came in my feed.
And this is like this is Google technology. And before we just dive into Titans and another Google technology paper, I would say that it reminds me that just because Netscape was a leader in technology doesn't mean that Netscape will continue to be a leader in browser technology. And one of the big players in the space, which was late to the game, was Google, right? Or is Google. And now you're seeing Google start to develop technology to address the problems, right? So these papers are on Google technology. So Google is becoming a player. And just because OpenAI is there doesn't mean Google isn't going to show up and start doing interesting things.
No, absolutely. I mean, and as we all know, right, like Transformers came out of Google back in 2017, and which is what all the LLM technology, currently generative AI technology, is all based on, Transformers, right? So,
and I don't own any Google stocks. So
right. Full disclosure. So, so this the main thing is this threading that we're talking about, the memory, right? So let's focus on that. So if there is memory, the responses I get back from the LLM is clearly superior, right? Now, let's say you had a question about CPUs and the questions you had asked last night. Now, if you were to start a new thread and ask a question on CPUs, it will not know anything, right? Like what you discussed last night. But
it didn't learn anything from my engagement. It's not putting any of that in the LLM, right?
Yeah. So I mean, maybe should we? Yeah, it's not putting it in. I mean, like a global memory of what Eric Nielsen knows, doesn't know, what he's concerned about. That's sort of a global level, right? Okay, and then you have different partitions. Now it is as partitioned memory, so to speak, about what Eric Nielsen is interested in or is talking to the LLM about. Right. And in that particular swim lane, it does have memory. Like,
no, I understand it. I'm just saying, if I logged in as some other name, it's not going to know that me and ChatGPT did some research and figured out some things together, right? It's not re-updating that LLM model from all the thousands of conversations it has currently going on. Is that right?
No, it is. I would say no, it's not exactly. It is not right in the sense that if Eric Nielsen is using a free plan, right, on ChatGPT, whatever you type in is being used for training.
All right, so
it is. So if you gave it some,
not segmented to me specifically.
It's not segmented to you specifically. It'll be used in an anonymized fashion, right?
Okay.
But if you gave it some valuable information which you didn't know before, it's going to use it, right? To serve up answers to other people. So, so in that way, there is training going on, right? Or I don't know, training at runtime.
It's not doing training for my own org, right? So that's another element.
Correct. Or even for Eric Nielsen as a person, right?
Right.
So you have a login that's unique to Eric.
Right.
So ideally, whatever Eric types in through whatever, if he has 100 threads going, doesn't matter, right? Ideally, you should just know about Eric.
Right. It's not doing that today.
It's not doing that today.
It's doing it per thread. And then some of that falls away.
Some of that falls away naturally, right? Like, I mean, if I have to keep track of all the threads I have, it doesn't make sense, right? So then this Titan paper, I think that's where it is interesting, right? Potentially where at least in a lab setting, or it is not production, right? But in a sort of a research setting, they have been able to, looks like, come up with something where there's this sort of global memory that's available, right? For models to remember and use, right? So I mean, there is of course some bit of depth in there in terms of what this model is. So maybe I don't know, Eric, if we should kind of go into
Yeah, we
some
should
of
talk a
those.
little bit about the Titans paper, right? Which
Yeah,
is, they title it Google's next transformer breakthrough. So they did do the transformer breakthrough in 2017.
right.
And now they're talking about this model where they can actually do kind of like RAG based. They say the current attempts at solving the storing is either through RAG system, vector databases, extended context windows, or sliding windows like what they do in ChatGPT, where you have a certain amount. But that's what everybody's attempted to do, right?
Right.
The Titan difference is they're actually building a memory model, right?
Right.
That will learn what to remember while running, get smarter with every interaction, maintains context across months of use, and actually learns from the experience, right? And then adds it in. So
Right.
it is a memory model of some type.
Yes, yes. No, so I think the key, I think unlock, or not unlock, but I mean the main point here is that memory can make a big difference to learning is central to everything that we are doing, right? Like in terms of reasoning through things, actually. So when memory tech, so to speak, memory models, research, etc., around LLMs becomes more sophisticated, you're just going to get better output. And probably the frontier labs, of course, I'm sure, are working on all of this, and this is one example of an output. Yeah.
So the interesting thing here, when you look at what they say Titans really did was implement a new model called the surprise model, surprise-based memory model, where they try to assign a surprise weight to it. Like, is this immediate surprise? This is unexpected, right? I didn't see this coming, so that must have a higher weight. Historical surprise, this pattern is important. And a contextual surprise, this changes what we thought we knew. And so it tries to put weights on whether this is a surprise learning. And if so, then it will then prioritize that for adding into the model.
Right. I think that's a great one, actually. You picked out on, like, so if it's what kind of updation needs to happen, I think is sort of interesting. So depending on what is being asked. So I think those three things are pretty interesting. And I'm trying to just find where we looked at it. So immediate, historical, contextual, right? So, and I think the historical surprise is kind of interesting. If it knows something, like, I didn't expect this, that Eric knew this, didn't know this, or this question coming from Eric, how do I update what I know about it? So I think then it updates what it knows about Eric itself, which is, I agree, so, right?
That's if I'm helpful. Talking CPUs and I go, well, I did make it work for 64 gig, right? And it's surprised by that, right? Where it didn't expect that,
right?
And then it's an immediate surprise. It'll weigh that, like, so how far off is your interaction from what it was expecting you?
Right.
And if it's high, then okay, that's something it can then learn, and then introduce into its RAG model, right? Or it's I don't know if it uses RAG, but it has some kind of memory that it's using. Right?
Yes. No, absolutely. I think this is very promising, though it is just in research. It's not in production. So what does it take for this to come into production? I have no idea. Like, what kind of complexities, difficulties that they're going to be, right? But I think it provides a glimpse of where models like things like ChatGPT are going to go, essentially, right? Which is super exciting, honestly.
And this comes back to my friend thing, right? Like, I wanted to be my friend. I wanted to remember what I was talking about, and I wanted to get smart. But then I also wanted to be smarter. I'm not sure I wanted to learn too much from me. Because I'm hoping it's a lot smarter than me, right? And like, how much do I want it to be neutral versus how much do I want it to be my best friend, right? And then I self-select my friends, and now we're all idiots. Right? Like, I self-select people like me, and therefore I become in a bubble, right? Of all the people that are like me. So it's certainly like that. The other thing they talk about is adaptive forgetting, right? Like, what is not important, right? What should be forgotten, right? Because these, you don't want to, if you just want to record everything, then your models are going to be massive, right? You have to be willing to forget things.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think a lot of this is super interesting, actually. Honestly, like mimicking human brain memory, etc. Right? Like, and we absolutely have adaptive forgetting, obviously, right? We don't. I mean, we'd go crazy if we wanted to remember everything anyway, right? But a lot of it is unnecessary, what we are processing through the day. So, I think it's a fantastic analogy, actually.
And this is really interesting when you think from an industry perspective, that you have these big people. China was one with DeepSeek, right? But there's Google's off doing research and coming out with whole new models and whole new ways, and then one day they announce it in an article, right? And you're like, oh, we never even thought of that, or somebody else is moving the needle in a different direction,
right?
And in the computer industry, there was always tech shows where you could go read papers. People would do research papers and present them. So you could always get a sense, if you're in the industry, you could kind of go to the trade shows to see where people are going and what they're doing, right? Now with this, I'm not sure people are sharing, right? I think people are doing and implementing and trying to stay ahead of the arms race.
Right. So, ship fast.
Ship fast.
Right?
Implement ship fast, because it's like, it's an arms race.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's a super interesting. So I think moving to the second thing from Google, right? Eric,
there was another one.
So there was another one, right? And this is more perhaps incremental, right? But nevertheless super interesting. So on the RAG side, on retrieval augmentation, so where this sidecar, or I think you called it a train, right? I don't know, bogey of some sort, right? That's attached, right? Now, with that kind of memory system, so to speak, LLMs, it's always been very expensive. So I think a couple of things. One, PDFs. So the specific focus of this kind of memory is we are talking about is PDFs, and organizations have hundreds and thousands of PDFs depending on the sort of size of the company, right? And if Eric Nielsen works at Broadcom and asks a question to their in-house LLM, Eric is obviously expecting an answer based on what is there in the organizational knowledge, right? You're not expecting some dumb answer coming from the internet, right? Like that doesn't take into account what Broadcom already knows internally as an organization. So my understanding is one of the challenges has been just parsing these PDFs, the accuracy of parsing these PDF, and specifically around tables, right? Parsing OCR, right? Optical character recognition of these tables has been inaccurate.
So an example of this to get our heads around it would be, we have 100,000 documents documenting our software practices, right? They're all PDFs, right? And you buy our products, you get all these PDF documents that describe how everything works, right? All the software works. And what we're saying is that we get our in-house AI, and then we have to run those thousands of documents into our AI, right? And it picks out some, but then we don't know what they're going to ask. So we don't know how big they have the main model, but then how these PDFs almost act as extensions to implement more learning into the RAG extra system, RAG being a railroad car that you bolt onto your main model.
Right.
And so all of these documents end up in the railroad car, right? Which is RAG, right? And then as people are querying against them, it gets expensive to go through all those, right?
Yes, it gets expensive to go through all those. And again, so I think two things. Accuracy has not been great, and whatever Google has just released apparently has very high accuracy. And the way they have tested accuracy is around tables, because like machine reading these tables has been inaccurate in the past, especially around with LLMs. Okay, that's number one. Number two, how much can I read? How many PDFs can I read, or how many pages of PDFs can I read per given dollar? Right. And currently, my understanding with OpenAI, I mean, there's a table, but with OpenAI, you can only read per dollar. You can read about 400 pages, right?
Per dollar.
Per dollar.
PDFs,
400. No, 400 pages.
Pages, not even PDFs.
Not even PDF. 400 pages of a PDF, right? Of a or multiple PDFs, doesn't matter, right? Per dollar. Now, what this Gemini Flash, I think is called.
It's called Gemini 2.0.
Gemini 2.0.
Got a Flash implementation.
Right. Now, Gemini 2.0 can do 6,000 pages for $1, right? Which is massive, right? And the accuracy is super high. Is the point here, right? Of what it's reading. So in that way,
one, reading them, and two, putting them in kind of groupings that then make sense, and how accurate are they
Right.
at those groupings?
At those groupings, and then the chunking, right? So, I mean, honestly, for me, as a sort of an industry observer or watcher, this really brings into question, right, like the viability of, vector databases like Pinecone, for example, right? If you go back year and a half ago, like Pinecone used to be the darling, when we were pretty early in the LLM race, in the sense that if I had to train, even any smaller company's data and attach it as a sidecar to the LLM was a big deal, was a difficult thing to do, right? And stuff like Pinecone, etc., was super helpful. Or
so
even
Pinecone was like a vector database.
That's right.
Instead of training the LLM and having the LLM talk to all my PDFs every time, which would get expensive, you would have Pinecone read the PDFs, put it in a vector database, build the relationships, then give that to LLM.
Yeah, so I think
it acts as an intermediary cache.
Yes, intermediate cache, and as somebody else described it, it's a dumbed down, almost could be like thought of as a dumbed down lookup table, right? And as a cache, as you said, right? Like, which makes sense, a lot of sense. So if user is asking a particular query, I already have it, I can serve it up, right?
Right.
So the semantic similarity piece. So now the question is, okay, do you really?
So with Gemini 2.0 coming out, do they eliminate, because they dropped the price so low on going through the PDFs?
Yeah.
Maybe you just don't need the vector database anymore. Just forget the cache. Just go directly into the PDFs.
That's right. Seems like it. I mean, yeah, that's a question. And this is kind of been going on for a while, right? Like longer and longer token context lengths have been the trend, actually, right? And this specific thing is around PDFs specifically, but longer token context windows have been going on for a while. And even, in fact, Google was one of the first ones to actually give like really long context windows recently. So I don't remember when was the last one, but so it's in the same vein, really. So I think that's an interesting though update, right? Like where you're right, actually, Google is quote unquote catching up a little bit, actually, right? I think with what they're offering, and I mean, clearly Google,
Yeah, I think the big guys, Google, X from Elon, and OpenAI and Microsoft embedding there, and then Oracle. These guys are putting, when they talk billions of dollars, these new technologies and new processes are ever changing.
Right.
And don't count Google out, because Google has a lot of money per quarter to spend on this stuff, and they got great engineers, right? So they got guys in Silicon Valley that are very, very smart, and they can hire anybody they want, right, to work on that. And as much as the tech has been laying off, they've actually been reprovisioning people, right? So they've been reprovisioning. Guess where they've been reprovisioning people to?
AI, obviously.
Right? They're retraining, and they're getting people to work on these technologies, and they got smart people.
Yeah, right. What I hear, I mean, this is sort of becoming a bit of a recurring theme in terms of software engineers and what AI coding is doing to engineers, right? I think. Again, like I don't know whether I should call it a consensus, but what seems to be the thing is fresh engineers out of college, not really super valuable. You have elite coders who are working on embedded systems, NASA, blah blah blah, like Tesla, etc. Right? That's one group, and they are going to be in demand. They're going to be paid even more, right? It's the folks in the people who are product oriented, coders who are product oriented. They are going to go build and do lifestyle businesses or whatever it is, and ship apps, basically. So there's the people who are going to ship apps. They're the people who are going to do more embedded system-ish or cutting edge stuff. They both are going to thrive, so to speak. But the middle, people in the middle who are really going to code based on what they are told, I think is going to be on the wane. I mean, that's so. Anybody who has a product mindset, I think is going to do great, right? So it's today, I think the dominant question that anybody is going to have to answer is, what should I code? What should I build? Not how to build, because the AI is going to do the building for you. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's how this is evolving. So I think as far as software engineers are concerned and hiring, etc., I think is potentially going to follow this paradigm. It's kind of interesting, right?
But also the technology is moving so fast. I mean, to Gemini 2.0 and just the what you have to build. It's moving so fast that I think there's just going to constantly be churn, and you're going to need to have engineers to keep learning and innovating, right? Because it is interesting.
Sure.
and honestly, if I were Google right now, I'd be still worried.
Right.
Because I just spent yesterday afternoon talking to my search engine
Right.
and becoming friends with my search
Right,
engine.
of course.
And my search engine wasn't Google, right?
Yeah,
It was
I know.
ChatGPT. And
Yeah.
there would be no way Google would ever help me understand what I learned, right? And how to, it reminds me of overclocking your CPU in the gaming world, right? Like that's what I was doing, but you're just trying to figure out ways to do things.
What is overclocking?
You ever heard of overclocking?
No.
CPU, typical CPU from Intel gaming CPU that you're building a game, it would be run at 3 gigahertz, right? But if you go into the BIOS will let you overclock the CPU because Intel basically builds CPUs that will work within a threshold, right? The gate speed, whatever, is of a certain. So they figure out what the average is, and then that's what they clock it 10% below what the average operational is for that batch of CPUs, right? And so they go like, okay, this CPU is pretty good. If you get a really good batch, you can maybe run it up to 4 gigahertz, right? Before it overheats and fails, right? Then you can clock it to 5 gigahertz if you want to, but it's going to get really hot and melt. So then you can get, cooling systems, right? So they have these radiator cooling systems that are like water-based that go down, run water over on top of the CPU, right? And then have fans and whatever, and a little radiator, like it looks like your car radiator. Then you can overclock to 5.5 gigahertz, right? And so in the line of gaming, the faster your response time, the better you're going to be able to game because you beat the other guy by 10 milliseconds, right? Or whatever. And so you game, and then you can run the graphics higher resolution of that. So you're overclocking. So overclocking's been a thing for 20 years now. Gamers come in to buy their CPUs and then overclock them and cool them and do all kind of work there. But it's an art, right? It's an art, and it's trial and error. And I overclock my mining machines. Like, so if you're using a nice hash mining app, right, you can go in and overclock it, and you overclock your GPUs, right? Why? So you can get faster, more bit, more GPUs, so that you're getting more bitcoins
per unit,
right?
Yeah.
So you overclock and overclock is fun. And then I'm generally I'm not trying to overclock, I'm trying to over memory. Right. See if I could get, and what are these CPUs capable of? Well, it turns out you can run them at higher memory, but the memory controller tends to fail if you have too much memory accessing at any given time. So you're trying to figure out what you can, and it's not heat based, it's just the chip itself, right? And how well it can access extra memory. But that's kind of an industry thing that you do. And if I were to Google all that, I'd have to read through 500 pages of stuff to figure out what somebody's done for a given CPU memory controller. But just add GPT and it's ground through everything, and then it's engaging with me, not just giving me pages of stuff, but just talking to me as a friend, right? Go try that.
And to be fair, I mean, Google is doing summaries, right? But that is not a back and forth interaction.
No,
absolutely not,
no,
right? Like
yeah.
I ask a question, okay, you come back with a summary. That's the first thing I see. Okay, great, right? But now I have to ask another question, like. It's just not the same, right? So
if I ask Google, are there any instances where somebody cheated? No, it doesn't. It doesn't come back. It doesn't come back and tell you, oh, here, this is what you could do. They don't do that on the search engine. AIs do that. AIs do that all day long. They're very good at interacting and then tailoring from what they're learning from you. So it is
right.
So
I think the Google thing should be, if we were to just parse it a little bit, right? Like there are two aspects, right? One is the interface, right? So if we compare OpenAI, I believe is at 300 million weekly active users, right? 300 million, right? Google, of course, the number is way larger, right? $1.5 billion. Who knows? I mean, I'm not tracking, but so Google clearly has the advantage, but it's probably using users at a rapid pace, or the engagement is going down, and I mean, of course, they can't afford to cannibalize their own business, right? So that's the front end.
So
right?
When does the Google search window just turn into their AI interface?
I know.
Like
when it's too late, I don't know. But Mark Andreessen, A16Z, he had a very interesting comment on a podcast with Joe Rogan, I believe, or with Lex Friedman, where he said, startups exist because larger companies, incumbents, cannot cannibalize their own business, right? And what he says is actually well-functioning companies are the ones that are going to not cannibalize, like, right? Because they are meant to
Yeah, they don't want to cannibalize.
So
you're making $100 billion. Any move you make will just make you less revenue.
Yeah, exactly. So your shareholder, whatever, like your duty to your shareholders is to not cannibalize, maximize, right, what you got. So in that's a very interesting take. Actually, I never thought of it that way, right? So Google, if it continues to run well, maybe will not cannibalize, will never transition to properly transition, right, before it's too late. Who knows? So that's the okay. So that's the front end, right? Now we talk about Google Cloud's business, and when we talk about this RAG infrastructure or its ability to 6,000 pages parsing of PDFs with on $1, that's all cloud hyperscaler infrastructure, right? Now there it might shine, very well shine, do a great job. Companies like Broadcom or Intel or Apple, etc., might use the Google Cloud infra and get great benefit, right? Like, and Google can continue to do well on that department anyway, right? Like, so I think there are two parts now here. There's a bifurcation in terms of performance that's going to happen with Google, right? It's just inevitable, right? So anyway, I mean, I think we're going to see a little bit of that.
Happening.
It's all happening for sure.
But it's neat to see them continue to invest in the tech and produce papers and get them out there.
No, I mean clearly like very smart people. I mean, so that's not gonna go away. So, but it's an interesting dilemma. It is an innovator's dilemma, I guess.
So if you want to read his paper or his post, Sergey on Gemini 2.0, you can go to www.sergey.fxi.
And FYI, I think.
Yeah, FYI? Okay,
yeah, it's FYI.
SERGAY.FYI. And then articles/Gemini-Flash-2.
Yeah.
That's the article we're talking about. And he has links to the full paper, the full research paper from Google. So you're interested in learning a little bit more about that and reading what they announced in their paper. And he does a great summary of the whole paper as well. So he has 3 different levels. He has a summary, then he has a longer summary, and then he has the paper itself.
Yeah, right? Actually, there are 2 papers here, two mentions, I think. So there's the one from the Titan. We'll put both of these links in the comments, I guess, once we publish the podcast. But I'll put in both, and I think there's 2 different ones actually. So Ethan has that's the Titan paper, and we'll put that in. And then Sergey was the Gemini 2.0. Yeah,
and then Titan is from Ethan.
From Ethan. Yeah, so both are Google is the origin on both of these. Yeah. Cool.
Nice times.
Great times.
Always good. Every week I use it more and more, and I'm gonna keep you guys updated on whether I was able to get. I ordered 2 32 gig chips, and I got some 4 gig chips and some 8 gig chips, and I'm gonna throw them all together, and then I'm gonna go to ChatGPT and tell them how it worked. But I think I'm gonna have to post a blog on it in order for it to really add that to its main LLM.
And Eric, right? You can use your phone. The camera on your phone, point it, and ask ChatGPT, have a voice conversation. It'll even help you assemble those chips if you run into difficulty.
Right. How do I put the memory in? It is true. It is true. And I've struggled with some of these little tiny machines, right? And where do things go? It's interesting.
Yeah, it's insane. It's incredible, actually. I think some of these things just blow your mind, honestly.
Fun times.
It's amazing.
Fun times. I like to mess with hardware. Hardware is my friend.
Right.
I hate the cloud revolution because you don't get any hardware anymore, right? I'm like going through and looking at. I need a bigger machine, so these little nooks aren't gonna do it for you. Aren't gonna do it. I'm gonna have to. But then I'm like, I don't like the noise. I like having a little home lab that I can run really heavy stuff on.
Right.
But I don't like to pay for it. I don't like the noise. Right. So now I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get like a super micro or whatever that has. And if you've ever turned a super micro on, you can put 250 gig of memory in it and so forth. So it's like a little mini tiny server.
Right.
But the fans that they got, it sounds like a jet engine. So now I'm gonna have to figure out how to cool the stuff without fans. Right. Like how do I do that? Well. Okay, there's a couple.
Water cooling, maybe,
water cooling, or just a big aluminum block that sits right on top of the CPU, right? With a little. They make super quiet fans, so you can get a little quiet whisper fan, and then put a huge aluminum fan on it. That literally sticks up 7 inches above the CPU, and then just blow quiet air through it. The reason these guys are so low is they make a super small, low profile.
Right.
So there's no natural. You can't put a big aluminum fin on the CPU because it's a low profile little box, right? A little nook.
Right.
And so that means that you naturally don't have natural cooling through a big aluminum radiator fin system.
Right.
But you can do that. You can take the lid off and then just.
Boy.
But then you got this gloggy thing that sits under your desk somewhere.
Hacking away.
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
hardware.
It's fun times.
That's
fun
awesome.
times.
That's awesome.
You're right. Next
Good.
time I'm going to get a camera and I'm going to point it out and say, how do I cool this?
It's a lot of fun. I've
Let
done it. I've done it
let
with other
process
things.
the image and then tell me what I should be doing next.
It's amazing, actually, right? Like I've done that, like not with hardware, but with other things. Actually, with hardware too, it actually solved my problems. It's amazing, right? Like I was trying to get a old hard drive to plug into my current Mac, and it was not recognizing it. It told me that, hey, maybe it's incompatible because of a driver. It's maybe formatted on Windows, and actually it solved the problem for me. It's amazing, actually. So I think the possibilities, I think people are just beginning to work on it, and that's one of my predictions. And this is like, voice activated sort of chat is going to be the next big thing over the next few months for people, and all of that usage is going to skyrocket for ChatGPT, and probably, again, I'm sure they'll monetize
for me,
it.
I just can't wait for an Android, right? So
for an Android
my
version.
Android can sit here, and we're going to have an Android on
Android.
the podcast, right? And we're going to just sit with Android and chat with them. Right?
Actually, you know what we should do, Eric? Maybe we should bring Notebook LM on our podcast and see how that goes. Actually, maybe that's interesting.
We could add a second StreamYard, window, and just have Notebook LM there, and then we'll just do a podcast with the AI. And, and
it can chime in.
Yeah,
it can chime in with what it's.
I'm not sure. I think it does its own thing. I don't think it's built to do a bi-directional podcast with two real people.
People. I guess we'll have to feed the data. I know it does it it can generate a podcast out of content.
Two people doing a podcast, but I don't think it's going to pay attention to us.
I'm going to try it actually today and see what I get out of it.
Because that's what I want. I want our friendly, I just remember one of the shows, I forget what it was, had a robot that sat there. It was a skeleton kind of late night TV show with a skeleton, and it was all fake, right? But we'd always go to it and ask it a question and give you some humorous. It was the comic relief skeleton, right? It would be fun to have a comic relief AI.
Actually, so this is almost like saying, hey, let me get a third avatar on the show, right?
Right.
And it's going to answer things that I don't know. Hey, what was the last valuation on the last OpenAI's last round? And it can chime in.
We
right?
just timed to Bob. We'll name it something. And we'll say, Bob, what do you think about that? What's that? And Bob will go, well, Eric, it's
XYZ, right? And there are people who are doing this with sales engineering.
Sure.
There are different roles, right? Where people are using this as actual real life use case. So
a third podcast guest.
Yes, third podcast guest, co-host, right?
Yeah.
And
name it Al.
Al. So no, that's amazing. So I mean, next session I want to do maybe on GTM. I think GTM will be a great topic to cover next time, perhaps. Or maybe we're going to bring on a guest. It'll be fun, right? Like a real human guest. Not AI guest, a real human being. So anyway,
all right. Well, at the top of the hour, thanks for spending 60 minutes with us. Look for us on Spotify and Apple. We're going to be publishing there so you can subscribe. Give us a subscribe. We're looking for subscribers. Recommend to a friend. If you made it to the end, we always are talking about AI and trying to bring it back to reality. So if you're not an AI engineer, you can still listen to us and understand what's actually happening in Silicon Valley around AI.
All right. Sounds good, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thanks.